these crappy, one of these off the charts amazing homes as a comp, and I might not want to use a like an old plain Jane crappy house as a comp. Okay, I just might not. Now this one isn't. Maybe the pictures make it look amazing, but this one went for $155 a foot. And so you might want to rule that out. You might want to rule out if there's anything really off the charts high or really off the charts low, you might want to rule those out. Okay. And then after that, what I'm doing, so just to kind of review for a second, the first thing I'm doing is where is the house? I'm doing some background research on the house, figuring out what neighborhood it's in. And then I'm grabbing comparables that are pretty close in price per square foot and pretty close in size, pretty close in number of bedrooms, everything else. Make it as similar as you can with a range to get about a dozen comps. Then once I've done that, I'm showing up to their house with all this stuff. Okay, I'm showing up with all the comps, knowing that 921 Bald Cypress Drive, I hope you can see this, at $155 a foot. This is on a scale of 1 to 5, this is a 1. And I know that 1060 Tallow Tree, this is a 5. And I'm walking into their house and I'm immediately assigning a value to the house as a whole as, is this a 1 or is this a 5? Or where is it at in between? Knowing full well that every customer that comes through is going to compare it to everything else. And as you go through these, you're going to find varying levels of upgrades. Okay. Assuming they had a decent realtor, gave them decent comps, you're going to see the okay homes are selling for okay prices, the crappy ones selling for crappy prices, the awesome ones selling for awesome prices. And I would bring the entire range that they can fall into to that listing appointment. Because if you've never seen the house before, you don't know. The house could have been amazing when it sold 2 years ago, but then they have 3 pit bulls and they like to get in fights and throw shit at one another. You never know. You don't know until you walk in. Okay, but you should be assigning a value to all these things and picking a number and just saying, okay, I think this is a 2 on a scale of 1 to 5. So it's below average, which means they're going to fall at this 175 to 159 range. Does that make sense? Anybody got any questions so far? Pretty simple. Now then, guess what's going to determine whether it's 175 to 159? It's how soon do you want to sell it? If somebody says, you know what, if it sells great, if it doesn't great, then they're probably going to want to be at this 175 number. But if somebody has a family member that's sick, or if they've got to be somewhere in a month, guess what? They need to be falling out of this 159 number. There's the I want to sell it in a weekend price, and I want to sell it in 3 or 4 months price. Okay. So once again, we're just assigning a value of quality to the house. And then we're assigning kind of a range of pricing, and then we're assigning a price based off of what they tell you and how aggressive they want to be. Anybody got questions so far? Y'all are a silent bunch today. No questions. Okay. So this is how I do a CMA. So right here, I've picked out all my variables. Okay. I might rule out this one because it's a little on the low end. Okay. This one here, I can tell you right now, I would not bring 120 butternut as a comp. I would leave that off of my CMA unless I know for a fact they've put in a pool or something amazing. Because watch how this shapes things. So if I eliminate 155 a foot, and let's say I know they're going to be a little bit on the nicer end, so I'm going to eliminate 159, but I'm including 115. I'm including this 120 butternut comp. Okay, 218 a foot. Now I go here, and all I did was click one line CMA, and this is going to tell me an average price of 185 a foot on active listings and an average price of 187 a foot that's sold. Okay, but if I eliminate this 218 and throw these other guys back in here, okay, now guess what? Now we're looking at an average list price that's way lower. Now we're in the 170s. We just chopped $8 or $9 a foot off the average sold price, which on a house like this, you're talking about you just move the needle by $24,000 on your list price, just by not including the wild card house with a $150,000 backyard. Okay. So know what you're going to show them. If you walk in and show them some outrageous comp and they think that's accurate, you could be dooming yourself to not selling the house or a bunch of grief. Okay. So just what you show them matters. Okay. And you should not just come in here and click buttons and say, okay, here, I'm good, print this and I'm done. Eliminate some stuff, make it reasonable. Questions? Somebody raise a hand. What you got, Michelle?
Are we going to touch base on also considering what is active around the property that you would want to price accordingly to?
Absolutely. That's where we're going next. Kathy, what you got?
I have a potential seller that really did a sick backyard upgrade, everything, pool, outdoor kitchen and everything. There's no comps in his subdivision. Any advice?
So here's the thing. Here's what you're going to run into, and we'll tie these two in together. So right here, this is giving me a snapshot of what's going on in the Woodlands in that neighborhood. It's also giving me the history. Okay. But you can further kind of guide your client and shape this by just looking at the stats of the house that you're thinking about selling and then running a brand new search and saying, okay, I think they're going to be 2,700 living roughly and about $172 a foot. That puts me at 464. So the next thing I can do is I can come over here and I can just say what's actively out there in Mandeville. It's priced from 400 to 500 because this is your competition, right? And there's 11 houses. If you want to know why pricing went insane in the past 2 years, it's because when I did this search, I would see 2 things or 3 things max. But now we see 11 things. And so if you think about it, really what this is like dating for houses. It's really what it is. It's like Tinder for houses. Okay. So somebody's going to be moving here and they're going to say, okay, what are my options for what I qualify for? And what's going to make them want to buy your house? And from that standpoint, it's okay, well, I might buy this one because I don't know if I buy this one at all. This is done in Old Mandeville. But there's some of them that they might buy because they're totally painted and updated. This one looks like it might back up some green space. There's different things that'll make somebody buy one house versus the other. But once you are starting to arrive at a price based off a CMA of the history of that neighborhood and everything else, it's not a bad idea to just run a search and say, okay, if I'm a buyer coming to town, what's the odds that I would buy the house that I'm about to list at this price? Because if there's a bunch of better options out there, that's causing a problem. Somebody about to say something? Sorry, I thought I heard somebody come through. So basically, if there's a whole bunch of better options and more desirable neighborhoods, and there's just a lot of supply out there, then that should shape what you are suggesting to your client. So there's almost like 2 CMAs that you're bringing. One of them is the history of the home and the history of the neighborhood and kind of a snapshot. And the other one is, here's the other houses that people might buy. And people need to start looking at it from that prism of, here's what my competition looks like. I can tell you one very short story. I had, back when I was a really, really active agent, I had a buddy of mine who was selling a house. He wanted to list it at like 460, and we got him 500 in a matter of hours. But the reason is whenever I did a search in Madisonville, he was the only house that had a nice backyard and a really nice pool under 500 grand. And interest rates were really low. So I knew if anybody wanted a really nice pool with a nice back porch in Madisonville under 500, he was the only house, the only one. And so that'll kind of shape what you do. Anybody have questions so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
Just my concern would be about going back 180 days, just because like back then the rates were in the high 4s and now they're in the high 6s. So even if you find a house that's completely identical, it's not going to sell for the same thing it did 180 days ago because of what people can afford. So you're almost giving people false hope at that point, thinking that their house can sell for what it did, for what those people's did, because the house is identical.
We're seeing houses that are selling for that. and we're
Okay.
seeing, yeah, so we're not seeing a big price drop. What we're seeing is it's just taking more time. Okay.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I mean, think about it like this. Well, you've got all these pressures on the market right now in the housing market. You've got inflation, you've got the Fed who's actively trying to put us in a recession. You've got all these things that are saying the prices should go down. But there's one thing that's going to overrule all those things. And what that thing is if any of you guys own a house and you have a 3% interest rate, you are not going to list your house to buy another one with a 7% interest rate. And so what that's doing is it's keeping a lot of supply off the market. So we're seeing people be a little bit more negotiable. But if you were listing your house for 200 a foot last year, you're not going in at 160 this year. You're probably going in at like 195, 198, and just negotiating a little bit more. What you got, Sean?
Backing you up on that just a little bit, having been an agent for 20 plus years and been through multiple recessions and life-changing events like 9/11, the difference, back in 08, 9, and 10, we saw a massive price reduction because of inventory, because the inventory was so high. The foreclosures were so high because of the mortgage failures. The difference we're seeing now, as opposed to the past, where the prices would drop 3, 5, sometimes 10%, is that we just don't have enough inventory on the market. In Louisville, our market never really fluctuates big or low. It just kind of stays steady. What I'm seeing right now here is that we're in a normal real estate market. We're not slow. We're in what's called a normal real estate market. This is what we've been used to, for the past 20 years. The past 2 or 3 years has been an anomaly. Right. And I know a lot of newer agents here in Louisville are freaking out because they're like, oh my gosh, I actually have to sell a house now. I'm like, yeah, it's going to take you 30, 35 days to sell a house, if it's priced correctly, as opposed to a weekend. Usually if it sells in a weekend in this market, it was priced too low. That's just what we're seeing. So
I totally agree.
Just backing you up in a little bit more.
No, look, it's true. So at the peak in the financial crisis with the housing bubble that burst, we had 4 million listings, and now we have 1.1 across the country. So we had 4 times the amount of listings. I mean, that's a huge difference.
On our MLS, it's that exact same thing. We're still 4 times the deficit what we were in late 2009. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a very, very different situation. And for a lot of people, they think, oh, this is so slow. It's so slow. It only feels slow because you were driving 140 miles an hour. When you're driving 140 and you slow down to 80, you feel like you're barely moving. But it's not like we went from 140 to a stop. We went from 140 to normal. But it's probably going to feel weird if you haven't been in the market for a while, or if you've just been used to the hustle and bustle. Kathy, you had a question about how to deal with an outlier house. And I would say 120 Butternut is the outlier house in the Woodlands. And so the Woodlands is a perfect example. So 120 Butternut is on the larger side. All these other houses are low 2,000 or mid 2,000 square feet. And this is basically 3,000 living, and it's way overbuilt for the neighborhood. So what you're going to bump up against here, in my opinion, you're going to bump and look, some guy, I probably would have strongly cautioned my client against this. This was listed for $15, $14 a square foot higher than the highest other house, and it went for $12 a foot above that. So basically, imagine this house went for $200, so it went for $27. This house went for 80 grand more than the highest comp that it should have. So what's the problem with a client doing this? The problem with a client doing this is at some point, they're going to say to themselves, if I'm going to spend $675,000, I'm going to live in a nicer neighborhood. And people get that in their head. So it's like all these other houses, 300, 400, 400, almost all 400s, then some low 500s, and then boom, 675. Okay. So, and it doesn't matter how nice we're talking of a neighborhood. If you have a house that's upgraded to the max and it's a $550,000 house in a neighborhood of $300,000 homes, there's a lot of people who will say, I want my $500,000 house to be in a neighborhood of $500,000 houses. And that's true all the way up. I don't care. I've shown multi-million-dollar houses to clients in the Sanctuary, which is a really nice neighborhood on the North Shore for those of you who are not local. And they're like, you know what? If I'm gonna spend this money, I want to be on the river. I want to be on Functa. You know, like, I'm sorry, if I'm gonna spend $4 million, I'm gonna be here. And it's true all the way down to a $400,000 house. If I'm gonna spend $400,000, I don't want to be in a neighborhood full of $200,000 homes. And so, how you deal with this situation as somebody who's just really overbuilt is you start looking and you start saying, okay, where do they realistically think they need to be? Kind of take a snapshot of that in your head and then say, okay, well, in the 600s, what else can I buy there in the 600s? Like, what else can I buy in Mandeville in the 600s? And just start looking at it and saying, okay, well, where else could I go? So for 575 to 700 in Mandeville, there's 7 houses on the market. And where are they? This one is in Beauchene. I would argue a lot more desirable than the Woodlands. This has 2 golf courses inside of it. The Marina, there's a lot of people who would rather be on the water in the Marina than be there. But I mean, this is kind of an outlier. I wouldn't even include that. Woodstone, this is right beside the bridge, right beside the Sanctuary. There's a lot of people who would rather be in Woodstone at $198 a foot at $650 as opposed to that house at $675. Okay, it's just not as desirable. Brand new house in Old Golden Shores. And so really what you're going to do is you're going to start seeing what you're bumping up against. So the Woodlands, in my opinion, is not a mid 600 neighborhood. So what is a mid 600 neighborhood? It's really Woodstone, Beauchene, neighborhoods like that. And so you really need to price it in such a way that you're kind of pushing the envelope on your market, but you can only push it so far. If you push it too far, people say, I would just rather live in this nicer neighborhood for this money. What you got, Sean?
That's where I raised it last time. I don't know. I'm good.
Okay, my bad. So yeah, it's really all you can do is you can push the envelope as far as you push the envelope and then just see what you see. I mean, I can tell you, you're going to run up against the ceiling at some point where people are going to refuse to pay the Sanctuary prices for Beauchene. And people are going to refuse to pay Beauchene prices for the Woodlands. That might be where you just start researching these other neighborhoods and knowing what your house is comparing to. And that's just really knowing your market. Well, this is a $600,000 house in a $400,000 neighborhood. Where am I going to find $600,000 homes? I'm going to find it in Woodstone. I'm going to find it in, the Reserve. I'm going to find it in Beauchene. I'm going to find it in, what is it? Chapel. There's a Chapel something down there near Beauchene, the Marina entrance. I mean, figure out where your competition is in there and try to get as close to them as you can, just knowing that you're not going to get those prices most likely. Does that help answer your question, Kathy?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What's that, Stacia?
With Kathy's question, if you still have difficulty finding like how to price that house because of the extra features that they have, I always revert back to calling an appraiser friend. How would you credit this on an appraisal? And given the fact that there are no comps. And I know that we have a couple of people within the organization that can help you with that. You've got BJ, who is an appraiser. And then you have Stephanie's fiance, Todd, who's an appraiser in the area. So even if it's somebody out of state, it's always good to reach out to an appraiser to try to get a little bit more on how to value this, how to value a whole house generator, how to value a in-ground pool, outdoor kitchen, those kind of things. Because it is really hard for us to be able to break it down if you've never seen it on a report.
That's good, Stacia. Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell you this. I have a lot of sellers that tell me, well, I just paid, $12,000 for a home generator. And yeah, absolutely. But an appraiser's giving you $5,000 for it. So it just really helps to be able to give the sellers those numbers and say, this is what you're going to get at the end of the day in an appraisal.
I totally agree with that. I think there's two different things. Like, I can't disagree with that point at all, and I completely agree with her. However, if I was going to play the other side of the coin, I would say that realtors should be the best at valuing houses. We should beat the appraiser's socks off all day long. Like, every good realtor that I know is better at valuing houses than appraisers are. I think appraisers are great at justifying a value after the fact, but there's a reason why appraisers are not realtors, and it's because they're going to look. They're not going to think outside the box. They're not going to do anything else. And look, valuing homes is an art form. If there's one thing that's hard in our industry, it's valuing homes properly. That's the thing that you can't just teach. You know, you have to really know your market. You have to have a feel for it. And so I completely agree with calling your appraiser friend and say, hey, what's the max we could get? But what they tell you might not be accurate for what the market is saying. And what the market is saying is going to trump everything else, because if you can't get an offer at a certain number, it doesn't matter whether the appraiser would appraise it. But if you get the number, it doesn't matter, because if it won't appraise, then you're not really going to get the number either. So it kind of goes hand in hand, but you know.
Can I add something? Hey, it's Lindsay.
Please do, Lindsay.
Hey, Kathy, I had a unicorn house like this in my neighborhood that I listed this month. And I live in Southdown in Covington, and all the houses that have been sold in the past 2 years, with the exception of one new build because that other house burnt down, they all had not been touched. Like, so they were original from 2005 or earlier, so not renovated at all. Then here comes this house that's completely renovated, has a pool, has a whole home generator, and a new roof. There were 0 comps in my subdivision. So what I did was I put in a search in the MLS, and I searched in the public remarks, like new roof. And then I searched for like a renovated year between like 2018 and 2022. And I filtered for the ages of the homes and what kind of communities they were. Like, I X'd out any gated communities. And I found like 3 amazing comps. And I looked at their school district, and I put all of these things in a spreadsheet for the appraiser. It went under contract with 2 offers before the weekend. And we priced it below what I comped it at because they had medical issues and they needed to sell right away. But I did that, and I had it all in a spreadsheet with my notes, comparing and contrasting like the things that make a home sell, because my house was in Covington, but I had a house in Madisonville and I had a house in Mandeville in those comps, and it appraised a day later at value. So I think like Grant is right in saying that like we are the ones that determine it, and like the purchase price ultimately solidifies it. But if we walk the appraiser through exactly how we handled it, it's kind of hard for them to argue it.
I 1000% agree with that, Kathy. And so if you take the unicorn listing and you get a really high number, you better be prepared to deal with that number beforehand. And appraisers will not, most of them will not speak to you after the fact. Now, when they go to do that appraisal, you can help them do their job. You can say, these are the comps that I use, and this is why I use them. And the appraiser, now if you think about it, the appraiser has to go do more work to undo the work you've done for them. Whereas once that appraiser's done and it comes back low, then you're asking the appraiser to go back and do more work for free and redo their whole thing. That's a lot less likely to happen. Go ahead, Stacia, what's up?
Okay, I think I might have confused everybody. So I wasn't saying get an appraiser to give value of the house. I was talking about specific upgrades that you have 0 comps to offset. So in Kathy's situation, it was this amazing backyard renovation that had been done. And that's the only time that I'll reach out to appraisers and say, I mean, what are we looking at? What are the ranges that you can justify on an appraisal report that a lender is going to take?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
That
And you should absolutely use that, but you should absolutely use that in a backdrop of what do I think the market will actually do?
Oh, for sure.
Yep. Like, you are the final say.
Now with bringing comps, and I know somebody had asked about going back 6 months. I still go back 6 months because in essence, that's what you're supposed to do. You go back 6 months. But what I do is I show the sellers the variations on how the prices have changed also in that 6 months. So you might have a comp that goes back 6 months, but then you have one from 60 days ago, and they can see the change in pricing, the sales price. So they get a kind of an idea of where that market is leading, and it helps us to be able to advise them better. You can see here the market shifting a little bit, and you're losing maybe 2% or something like that. So it helps you in being able to justify your pricing going in there. And then what I also do is I always prepare for that one comp that the seller always has. They always say, this house sold for this. I always bring that. And I bring the entire MLS listing and everything I can possibly find about that house, because you know it's going to come up. Oh, well, my neighbor's house sold for, $250 a square foot, and I'm telling them to list for $195.
Yep.
That's good. Thank you.
I had in Ascension Parish where I could not find any comps for my home, and I removed the condition, and it pulled up a whole bunch of houses. For some reason in that parish, realtors are not putting the condition in. So sometimes removing a criteria too gives you more comps. Playing around with the criteria, definitely.
Right. All right. I've recorded this whole thing. Does anybody else have questions on running CRM? Because the next thing we're going to get into is stale listings. Anybody got anything? All right. Stale listings. And Stacia and Lindsay and some of you others, I would love it if you contribute to this and tell me how you deal with it. What I made a rule of thumb to always do, whenever I go list a house, first of all, I'm taking every listing. I don't care if it's overpriced. I prefer it to be priced accurately, but if they are dead set on being crazy overpriced, I'm still going to take the listing, and I'm going to coach them and let them know that I think they're overpriced, and I'm going to work on price reductions. Okay. But for me, I understand that putting signs in the ground is the key to making money. Even if that house itself doesn't sell, it's growing your brand. It's growing your reach. Okay. So I would say, unless they're crazy, like my litmus test for not taking a listing is if they were crazy and way overpriced, then I'm out. If they're nice and overpriced, I'm in. If they're crazy and underpriced, I might be out. It's more so a psychological thing. So I would always bring comps and leave them comps. And I would make it a point when they start pushing at that initial listing appointment, I would say, look, we're going to try it where you want to try it. However, I want you to understand these comparables are the comparables. These are the comps. And just make it a point to note, hey, I've got 7 houses under contract right now. I've got whatever I've got under contract. I'm selling a lot of homes. I'm fine with trying at your price. However, I don't want you to call me in 2 weeks saying, well, this hasn't happened yet, because we're both going to know why it hasn't happened. I further, because a lot of homeowners don't think this far down the road. All they think is money. I'll further explain to them, look, based off these comparables, even if somebody wrote us an offer at this number, it is probably not going to appraise. There's no reason for it to appraise. And so even if you get the number, you're very unlikely to actually get the number. I make sure they understand all those things, but then they think that everybody's a cash buyer, so that appraisals don't matter. So you're going to run into some people who are just going to push you no matter what. The main thing is leave them with the comparables and write down your suggested number. We'll go into this really quick. I'm hoping none of you guys are pricing on the 9s. Like, don't ever price anything $399, $999. And the reason is because that's going to put you as the last house that everybody sees when they go on Zillow and Realtor.com, which is where everybody goes. From 350 to 400, the 399 house is the last house they're going to see, generally speaking. Okay, it puts you at the end of that list, and then you're completely left off the next list. You're better off pricing at 400 than 399, 999. Everyone sees it, because no one in my entire history of being a realtor said, I'm searching for a house from 350 to 399, 999. They all say I'm searching from 300 to 400 or 400 to 500. And the whole point is you just want to show up in as many searches as possible. But that being said, always leave them the comps and always start bugging them and letting them know hey, put 2 more houses under contract this week, got a lot of activity, but yours is really slow. I still think we're overpriced. Being proactive and reaching out to them to let them know that is a lot better than wait until they reach out. If you're waiting until they reach out to you, it's just going to be fussing at you. Well, you haven't talked to me. This is your fault. You're not hitting the magic button. Something's not going on. Okay. Yes, Danielle.
Are you going to talk about your timeline for price reduction? Because I don't know, I think maybe just a little bit more out here, people still are just listing so high. And even though, like, I always start off, like, I'm the same as you, let people list for what they want to list for with warning. But I'm just wondering, like, because of things are staying on the market longer, what is the timeline of price reduction? Do you start having that conversation after 7 days and it's crickets, like 2 weeks? Like what's the timeline you do for price reduction?
Go ahead, Station.
Okay, so for that, when I do what Grant does, I go into the listing appointment with the comps, with my recommendation, everything. I do the same thing. I'll list the house. You want to list it for this, but at that listing appointment, I already determine a timeline. So I tell them if we do not have enough activity in, let's say, 10 days, and then my recommendation is to start dropping the price. The longer you stay on the market, the worse it is. Now, obviously, right now, we spread that out a little bit more. You've got the holidays. So I tell them to give it probably a good 10 days. I don't think the 7-day rule applies anymore. Houses are staying on the market longer. So it's hard to really determine if it is overpriced. Or if the market is saying it's overpriced at this point. So I do that, and in the listing appointment, I prepare them ahead of time so that in 7 days, I'm calling them and saying, look, we've only had 2 showings, or we've had no showings. They're already prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
I still think at day 10, we need to drop that price. And I try to guide them as to what I think they should drop it to at the listing appointment, just so they're prepared. It's not a shock.
I know Sean wants to jump in here, but let me stress one more thing, and then please go, Sean. We have a dedicated listing presentation that deals with this. We have a listing presentation in video format that deals with this. We have a YouTube video of me delivering the listing presentation that deals with this. The issue that most realtors have that are not doing what we do is they go present themselves as these magical unicorn wizard realtors that just make amazing things happen until the house hits the market, and then reality sets in. And once reality sets in, then you're chasing the market and doing price drops like crazy. The great thing about us is we can sell with just truth and facts because we have a value proposition. And when we show them the facts of where homes sell, when we show them the facts of these are the amount of people searching online, 99+% of people my age and younger shop online, 97% of baby boomers shop online for real estate. It's right there in the listing presentation. When you deliver that listing presentation in that way and make them understand the realities of how homes sell, it's not magazines and open houses and broker tours. It's the reality of where homes are actually selling. You are much likely to have an easier conversation when it comes time for a price drop, especially if you make it a point to say, look, I've sold 40 houses this year, or even fake it till you make it. If you haven't, say, look, we've sold, 400, 500 houses out of my office this year. We've sold thousands of houses nationwide using these strategies. If your house isn't moving and we're moving a lot of other houses, then it's probably not me. It's the fact that you are way overpriced as I'm showing you. Okay. And the sooner you can plant that seed and the more accurately you deliver the listing presentation of the facts, as opposed to the warm and fuzzies and the crazy stuff that most realtors do, the easier these conversations are. Go ahead, Sean, what you got?
I 100%, you just said it. I 100% am completely upfront with them on the pricing. And I actually use the term a lot, roll the dice. So I'll tell them where I think their house needs to be. And then I will absolutely say, if you want to roll the dice at your price, because you never can tell. Somebody could come along, it could be that beautiful home and they're $10,000 overpriced and they may get it. But I let them know that we will have to, if it doesn't sell within a certain amount of time, we will have to do the price reduction. Now, where I vary a little bit on price reduction is because the economy is changing so quickly. I think that the timeline for that price reduction is starting to vary. So for me, I look completely on activity, and then feedback, finding out why the house hasn't sold. Are they saying it's overpriced? Are there agents? If I don't get feedback through showing time, I actually make the phone calls and say, what's the problem here? So yeah, 7 to 10 days. For me, that might be a little bit early on a price reduction, especially when the average time in Louisville right now is 33 days. So I may stretch that out a little bit based on if we're still getting activity, or if we're getting enormous amount of activity. If 20 people have come in the home and it hasn't sold, you know it's overpriced. That you just know that right out of the gate. If it hasn't sold when 20 people have looked at it, especially with inventory the way that it is. But if you've only had 2 people look at the home, maybe it's just a slow neighborhood at that time, and maybe the house isn't really that overpriced yet. And it's hard to make that determination until you get some feedback from some other agents. If you haven't had any activity all in 2 or 3 weeks, well, then maybe it's time to drop the price. But I think that the variable exists right now in the market because the market is changing and fluctuating so quickly in the average days on market. But definitely up front, take every listing just about that I even take crazy people because I like crazy people. It's just not a problem for me. I know how to manage crazy people, but I'm super brutally honest with them up front. And then I tell them, we'll roll the dice at your price. But if we come back, your ultimate goal is to sell. This is maybe something that you're going to have to do in a couple of weeks from now. So it's different ways to approach it. But I definitely think that you can modify what you're doing based upon the trends in the market and the trends in those neighborhoods.
No doubt. And what I stress to them is everyone shops online. This also plays into, double dipping off all these clients. One of the first things you should ask them is, where are you moving to? Okay. Because kind of the whole idea of this is get more listings so that your listings will generate buyers. So rather than paying for a Zillow buyer, now your buyer lead generation comes from a profitable source, which is listing homes. But whenever they say, oh, here's where I'm moving to, you ask them, how are you searching for homes? And when they say Zillow, you can basically, remind them of this and show them this. I've just pulled up all the $500,000 to $600,000 homes in my area. You can literally look at the photos and choose which one you think looks appealing and which one you want to go see. And if your house doesn't look like it belongs in this list, then people are not going to go see it. I literally tell them this is Match.com for houses. This is Tinder for houses. It just is. Okay. Like it's literally people choosing to see a house based off of how cute it looks and how it looks from the outside. And if your house doesn't look like it belongs on this list, then that tells you something. You're not going to get activity. It's just a reality. But this is where people shop. And they need to understand that and understand the realities of their situation. So delivering our listing presentation, getting good at it is incredibly important. Questions? All right. So let's take this one step further. And then we can wrap up unless anybody's got further questions. So dealing with the harsh conversation of somebody says, I want to cancel our listing agreement with you because the house hadn't sold. Okay. How do y'all deal with that? I see everybody raising their hands. I'll tell you guys a story of one of them that I dealt with and kind of wrap all my strategies into one. And then I'd love to hear how you deal with it as well. One of the things that I make sure I say at all listing appointments is when you get to the page, it's talking about what makes homes sell, price, amenities, condition, location, all that stuff. What I tell them is if you have an amazing house, amazing location, you don't need to pay 6%. You can keep your equity. Everybody's going to want to buy your house. But some houses are it's either where they are, the condition they are, they need a new roof or a new AC or whatever. You need to use our savings as a tool to get your house sold. I always stress that at a listing appointment, and I make them get that into their heads. And the reason is because, in my opinion, the reason houses don't sell is always price. The reason houses expire is price. Okay. Everything is sellable at the right price. And that's just a reality. And if they're priced too high, then one of two things needs to happen. Either they need to invest in their house to make it worth what they're asking, or they need to reduce the price to get to where everybody's willing to buy it. That's your two choices. And so I had a listing in Boshin, and this lady told me she was in no hurry to sell her house, yada, 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 but she wanted to get on the market. But at the end of the day, the reality is her son and her grandkids were moving, and she wasn't sure where he was going to take a job at. He had multiple different job offers. But it just so happened that me and the wife and kids, we were on vacation in Disney World when she called me and says she wants to cancel the listing. Okay. And I asked her why. And she said, well, we haven't had much activity. And so, I think we need to hire another agent to get our house sold. And I asked what they're going to do that I'm not doing. And they said, oh, we're going to be in magazines and we're going to do an open house. And I asked her, what's the newfound sense of urgency to sell? Because you've told me over and over again, I'm not in a hurry. And she said, well, my son has figured out where he's going to take a job at. So now we really want to get moved. And I said, okay, how are you finding a house there? Are you driving there to view open houses, or is somebody sending you magazines? And she said, no, I'm on Zillow, silly. And she was like 70 something years old. I said, okay, so you're on Zillow. I said, are we not on Zillow here? Like, are you not going to be able to find a house because you can't go to that open house and get that magazine? And she realized that she is 75 and she's shopping exclusively online. And I asked her, I said, what do you think everybody else is doing that's all younger than you? They're online too. And they're looking at your house and realizing it's overpriced. And she said, so where do you think it needs to be? Because my other agent told me. And within 2 minutes, I'd done a CMA on my phone and came up with damn near the exact same number as the other agent. And I told her, you can either get there with me and still have a good bottom line, or you can go pay her 6% and get there and take even less equity out of your house. I said, we have 30 days left on our listing. Why don't we just get there? And so we reduced it to the price that we suggested, and it was under contract almost immediately because it was finally priced right. But making people understand that open house and broker tour and magazine spread is not going to make their house sell is important. And once you start dealing with those stale listings and they talk about hiring somebody else, ask them to say, look, the reason your house isn't selling is because it's overpriced. We talked about this from day one. Are you planning on increasing the price of your home in order to pay this higher commission? And that's when they realize, hang on, I'm shooting myself in the foot. Does everybody understand where I'm going there? It's very, very simple. It's, hey, if we're overpriced, and it's one of two things. And by the way, I've sold dozens of houses this year. Either we are overpriced and you're going to hire a new agent and increase your price and make the problem worse, or you're going to use my savings as a tool to get to the price where you need to be at to make your house sell. So do you think it's me, or do you think it's the price? And once you put them on the spot with that blunt question, people start to look at things differently. They start being more rational. Anybody want to add to that? John, Danielle, Stacia? Danielle, see, you've got your hand up. I don't know if it's still up or.
No, sorry. That the fact of like building in a price reduction timeline into the listing presentation, that's very helpful. I don't know if it's just maybe because people are more greedy out here in California, or everyone thinks they're right out here, but there's a lot more people willing to just list it high and sit and wait, and you check in on them because again, I want to sell your house, not just list it. And they just go, they're not interested in price reducing, even though it's been like 30 plus days. They're like, no, we're just going to wait and see.
Well, a lot of them won't be paying attention, but that's why I would make it a point. I put everybody in a group text that I list a house with. I put like husband and wife, whoever it is, I put them in a group text. And I'll let them know, like I'll just drop them a text randomly, just checking in. Be like, hey guys, just checking in. We haven't had a lot of activity. I still think we're a little high. I put 2 other houses under contract this week. The market is still good. I just think we're priced outside the market. And whenever you send that, you're doing really 3 things. You're reinforcing that it's overpriced, and you're letting them know you're busy, and you're letting them know you're putting other things under contract. It's not just them. So it kind of starts ruling out the argument of, oh, my realtor sucks. Because my realtor is actually successful when things are priced reasonably. Go ahead, Sean.
Communication. That's what the entire thing boils down to. In the past 2 years, I've done 176 transactions, and I've lost 1 house midterm in that time. And it's all come down to communication. You know, have I had frustrated sellers? Of course, we all have, especially in the past couple of months. But I communicate with my clients regularly. I let them know what we're doing, how we are. Again, like Grant said, letting them know, you know, we're still overpriced. I know, you know, whenever you guys are ready to drop the price, you know, I'm ready to go. But I'm also, again, the communication at the listing appointment. When you communicate properly at the listing appointment, this comes to experience, listening to keywords of what your sellers are saying and picking up on those keywords and turning them around, because you've already been there and done it and got the t-shirt, right? You've seen that come across your table. So through experience and picking up on what they're saying and what they're looking for and being able to head those issues off at the pass, the house hasn't sold in a month. Being able to already provide them with the answers before they even ask them, because you know what they're going to say. And I know this doesn't help a lot of newer agents, but at the same time, may have to take a couple of lumps in the road. And I know Grant had said, you know, some of the things that he had said about doing, and they're spot on. But if somebody actually approaches me and says, I want out of the listing contract, of course I say, well, what's your reason? And they say, because the house isn't sold and I think XYZ agent can do better. I hit them with the facts. I know those folks, they haven't sold as many houses as me. And I'm telling you, the house is overpriced. I've been telling you that now for 3 weeks. If you guys want out, I'll send it by the end of the day. But I do such high volume that I'm able to do that. Not a lot of other people are able to do that. I understand, but that's how I roll.
No, look, it's a confidence thing. It's a confidence thing, and look, for some of you who are a little bit newer, you might have to tout your office. And look, my office has put all this under contract using these same exact marketing strategies. It's just not working for you. So is it your house or is it me? But look, it can be just as simple as, you know, for a lot of you guys who have follow-up boss accounts through us, here's what I would recommend. If you want to take down notes or remember one thing from this meeting to avoid this problem, here it is. Create a page, create a smart list inside your CRM and call it active listings. Okay. Create a task for you, a recurring calendar appointment. Okay. So just create a recurring calendar appointment, and it's going to be every Monday at 10 a.m. I'm checking in with all of my listings. Okay. And literally all it'll take is a quick text or a call or whatever you want saying, hey guys, just to let you know, here's what we suggested you start at. Here's where we're at. Here's everything we put under contract this month or last week or whatever. Here's all the activity we're getting on all these other houses, and here's what we've had on yours. Just to let them know I'm paying attention, and you okay. Because once it comes down to have that hard, you haven't communicated with them. If you have not communicated with them, it's very easy to say it's you. Okay, because they're going to think, well, she hasn't communicated with me, or he hasn't communicated with me. He's probably not taking calls. He's probably ignoring other realtors. It's probably their fault. Okay, so the more you communicate, the better. Other things you can push. If you really feel like you're about to lose a listing, start hitting them with very simple things you can do. Like, look, I'm only charging you 1%. Why don't we increase the buyer's agent commission? Why don't we offer a selling bonus? Why don't we offer an interest rate buy down? Why don't we do this? Why don't we use this money I'm saving you to basically create more sales opportunities? Okay. Use this savings as a tool rather than spending this money that I'm saving you to get open houses or a magazine spread with another realtor. Okay. Rather than paying another realtor higher commission, let's actually do something that moves the needle. What you got, Michelle?
Two things. Whenever you touch base with them, maybe every other week, touch in and see if there's any new actives in the area that might be new competition.
Absolutely.
And also, something cool, when you drop price, if you change your profile photo, it might entice more clicks from people who have already seen your house. They might click on it again and see the new price.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, questions? Everybody's quiet. All right. I've got somebody who I think we might be doing a really quick follow-up boss texting tutorial in just a minute. if any of you guys want to stick around or rejoin, I'll share that link if we do that. I'm not sure if we're doing that yet, but I've got somebody who's asking for that. So we might be doing that here short notice. If anybody wants to hop in, you're more than welcome to. Any further questions? If not, I'm going to shut it down.
Merry
Thank you
Christmas.
so much.
Merry Christmas, guys. Call me if you need anything, okay? Bye.